My son, Christian Andreacchio, was a hard worker, loved life. He just always liked the water. He talked about either working offshore in the Gulf. Then someone told him about the towboats, and that's when he went that direction.
He was on the verge of becoming the youngest towboat captain and probably had a long career running a boat up and down the river.
Loved to be the center of attention in the life of the party. Whether you were 80 years old or you were 15 years old, he was going to flirt with you. Always wanting to help somebody out. Ultimately, his good-heartedness is what got him in trouble at the end. He had gone to a party across the lake, and I think he met her at the party. Willie Goodman was very polite, cute girl.
When we first met her, she was quiet, and Christian liked her, so that was good enough for us.
Is there any doubt in your mind that Christian fell in love with your daughter?
No, no doubt whatsoever.
And did she feel the same for him?
She did, and she does to this day.
We were out to eat at a restaurant, had just sat down. My father called and said we had a tragedy.
911, where's your emergency?
Ma'am, we've had a suicide.
You had a suicide?
Yes, ma'am.
That was toughest news I ever heard. It still hurts today.
Who is it, sir?
Christian Andreacchio. He's laying across the bathroom tub, and he's got blood everywhere.
Did he take his own life?
No, sir. Absolutely not. No, he would never do that.
Okay, who's that in the background?
That's his girlfriend.
What's her name?
Whitley Goodman.
Do you believe that your son was murdered?
Oh, I 100% believe he's murdered.
Mr. Andreacchio was shot right side of the head. There was very little, if any, investigation that took place on the scene on the day that it occurred. It was totally bungled because the investigators were called off.
Because they didn't do their job, we had to do their job for them.
Sitting across from me today, do you know who killed your son, Christian?
Yes.
I was so confused whenever I started being blamed. I really was.
We're gonna keep on fighting.
I do have a small army, but they're smart. She did not kill him.
As a prosecutor, I have never in my career seen anything like this case.
I don't care to change anyone's mind.
They let somebody get away with murder.
I can't believe this is happening to our family. I think everybody was just kind of in shock. This is something, that happens to other people. It doesn't happen to you.
From their lakeside home just outside Meridian, Mississippi, Ray and Todd Andreacchio are haunted by the death of their 21-year-old son, Christian, in 2014.
A lot of days I look out there and, expect to see him out there with the jet ski floating about, but, every day you get caught with memories.
Christian grew up here on Delwood Shore Lake, where he fell in love with the water and dreamed of becoming a towboat captain on the Mississippi River.
He was on his way to being a really good man. And I think he would have been a good father, a good husband.
It's tough to talk about this, isn't it?
Yeah. I miss him every day.
Have either of you honestly been able to have any peace in your life during all of this since your son's death?
No.
No, we've kind of been at war since it started.
And you're at war now.
Yes, sir.
This isn't over.
No, well, it's not by a long shot.
For now, there are two unanswered questions at the heart of this case. Why would a young man with so much to live for take his own life? Or perhaps more importantly, did someone take Christian's life from him?
Your son's death, suicide or homicide?
Homicide.
It's definitely a homicide.
But Lauderdale County District Attorney Cassie Coleman, who took over the case in 2018, says the evidence points in another direction.
Well, at this point, there has been further investigation by multiple agencies that have determined it to be a suicide.
At issue are the events of February 26, 2014.
I had talked to Christian that morning. He was on the boat. You know, everything was fine.
Christian was a few days into what's called a hitch, a 30-day work trip on the Mississippi River where he was a first mate on a towboat. Ray called him about getting tickets for a Rihanna concert.
And he said, well, let me check the dates to see. He said, I gotta go. I'll call you back later. Love you. Got off the phone.
Just hours later, they were told that Christian was found dead in his apartment, which he shared with his girlfriend, Whitley Goodman.
And I was like, no, I don't think so. Christian's at work. He's not even in town.
A Meridian police detective broke the horrible news to them in person.
And he said, well, this is his driver's license. And when we saw his driver's license, it became a little bit more real.
But suicide? Nothing made sense to Ray and Todd.
He's never had any kind of mental problems, any kind of depression.
Professionally, at the age of 21, Christian's life couldn't have been better. And on the personal side, he adored Whitley, who had dropped out of high school and wanted to become a hair and makeup artist.
They made each other happy. He was crazy about her.
What is it, buddy?
Christy Chatterton is Whitley's mother.
She's very funny, very creative and adventurous.
She's a young woman that Christian Andreacchio fell in love with.
She is.
Whitley even moved in with the Andreacchios, but after a few weeks, Ray says Whitley became jealous, defacing a picture of Christian and his ex-girlfriend.
I figured that she stabbed the faces out, and then she brought the picture to me.
What'd you think, Todd?
I thought she was a nut.
The Andreacchios asked Whitley to move out.
And so, you know, his kind of attitude was, well, if she can't be here, then I can't be here.
Christian and Whitley moved into this apartment, which Christian paid for.
I felt that she was using him for money. He was providing her with a place to stay, with a car, clothes, makeup, whatever.
Whitley's mom saw problems too, especially when Christian was on the towboat.
She would have to stay on the phone with him at night so he could keep up with where she was and what she was doing.
You mean for like an hour after an hour?
Like hours and hours and hours every night. I didn't know how unhealthy the relationship had become.
But none of this seemed to add up to suicide for the Andreacchios.
So for him to take his life over somebody he'd been dating for 6 months, I don't think so, no.
On the night of Christian's death, Ray needed answers. She called her brother, Chris Thompson, and asked that he drive over to the Meridian Police Department. That's where Christian's friend, Dylan Swearingen, who made that 911 call,
What was your first name?
Dylan?
Dylan?
was being questioned, along with Whitley.
And I told him to be sure that Whitley didn't have Christian's phone.
At first, Whitley denied having it, but eventually turned it over to police.
To me, that was a big red flag right off the bat.
So she had lied initially about not knowing where Christian's phone was.
Right. It's very suspicious because why would you do that?
My personal opinion is that she did not want that phone to get in the hands of law enforcement because there were a lot of sexually oriented photographs and messages in that phone.
The Andreacchios were stunned to learn the investigation at the scene lasted only 45 minutes.
And the job they did in this investigation, how would you describe it?
Piss poor.
But that same investigation did turn up something that the Andreacchios hoped would be a game changer.
Both Dylan and Whitley are checked for gunshot residue, GSR. What do they find?
Gunshot residue.
On both their hands.
Both hands.
And what does that suggest to you?
They were in the room when the gun was fired.
Nobody wants to think that their child was at a point in their life where they took their own life. I mean, that's just human nature. But we had someone in the community who had killed himself, and that really bothered Christian. And he several times told me, you know, Mom, if anybody ever says I killed myself, you come looking, because I wouldn't do that.
For Christian's family, that horrible night in 2014 started a search for answers that continues to this day.
We took the time to have his funeral, and then the very next week, we started going to the police department.
From the beginning, the Andreacchios had questions about that 911 call placed by Christian's friend Dylan Swearingen around 4:45 p.m.
911, where's emergency?
They wonder, is this a genuine call or an elaborate act? Listen closely.
Who is it, sir?
Christian Andreacchio.
Okay, just try not to touch anything, okay?
That's Whitley wailing in the background.
Whitley.
Is she up with him?
Come down here. They don't want you to touch anything. Come on.
Just try if it's...
Come here, Whitley. Come here.
It just sounds fake to me.
Please get somebody up there. I think he shot himself.
He's already put it out there in people's mind that it's a suicide. So, you know, now that's how it's going to be looked at.
Did your son Dylan shoot Christian?
Absolutely not.
Pam Swearingen is Dylan's mother.
On a very bad day, my son lost his best friend.
Dylan and Whitley declined to grant us an interview, but their mothers agreed to speak for the first time to 48 Hours. While they wouldn't discuss specifics of the case, they're adamant their children did not commit any crime.
It was just so shocking, and you know what she saw, like she can never unsee it. I just want them to know that she did not kill him.
That night, Christy rushed down to the police station, where Whitley had just been questioned.
I just hugged her and comforted her.
Was she in tears?
She was hysterical.
Christian's death, suicide or homicide?
100% it's suicide.
Investigators found Christian's body in the upstairs bathroom, leaning face down over a blood-filled tub, with that gunshot wound to the right side of his head. 4 months after Christian's death, Benny DuBose became Meridian's new chief of police and took on the case.
A lot of this stuff didn't make sense.
Starting with Christian's gun.
When the gun was sent to the crime lab, they did not find any prints on the gun at all. Christian's prints should have been on the gun. The gun was clean, wiped down.
He says the bathroom was surprisingly clean too.
There should have been some blood splatter on this side and on this side. There was no blood splatter.
Suggesting what?
That, number one, the crime scene had been tampered with. Probably, most likely, the blood splatter had been cleaned.
Dubose says officers bungled the investigation.
Taking pictures on the crime scene with a doggone cell phone. They all were issued cameras, and the pictures, needless to say, were terrible.
District Attorney Cassie Coleman agrees. She inherited the case in 2018.
Would you use the word incompetent?
Yes, without a doubt, it lacked competence. It lacked thoroughness.
Dylan and Whitley were not even photographed.
There's been a lot of questions about, was there any blood on either one of them? The reality is, we don't know.
The timeline that Dylan gives of the events don't really add up.
Dylan told police Christian had called him around 2 early that morning, urgently asking for a ride home from St. Rose, Louisiana. Apparently, Christian had found out Whitley was cheating on him.
He was coming home to kick her out of the apartment.
You believe he was going back to break up with her?
Yes, sir.
Dylan says he picked up Christian and they drove back to the apartment. Almost immediately, Christian and Whitley began arguing. When Dylan says Christian suddenly took out a gun and put it to his own head.
According to the report, Christian threatened to shoot himself, telling Whitley to tell him that she loved him. Dylan ended up saying that he took the weapon away from Christian, unloaded it, and hid it.
But Whitley told detectives a different story.
When Whitley is asked, has Christian ever appeared suicidal? She says, no, I don't think so. There were inconsistencies throughout her stories.
According to police reports, Whitley told responders and friends that she discovered Christian's body. But she told a detective at the station that it was Dylan who found him.
She claimed to be asleep on the sofa, and a .45 caliber handgun is discharged, and she slept through it.
Is that believable?
No, not at all.
You know your guns. How loud is a .45?
That should have been heard 2 to 3 apartments over.
And remember, gunshot residue was present on both Dylan's and Whitley's hands. While police have not publicly commented about the GSR on Dylan's hands, Whitley told investigators she has an innocent explanation.
Her response was, well, I'm going to have it on my hands because I was shooting guns the night before.
She said she'd been target practicing with friends, a claim one of those friends said was true, but another said was false. But the Andreacchios are questioning everything, including something odd Dylan did earlier that day.
What are we seeing in this picture?
Dylan Swearingen at the credit union.
Who has an account at that bank?
Christian.
These photos were taken at 12:29 p.m., around 4 hours before Dylan called 911. Dylan told investigators that Christian had given him his debit card with a startling request.
He says that Christian told him to withdraw all of his money, that he was giving him his money.
But there was one little problem. Dylan didn't have Christian's PIN number, so he left empty-handed.
Is that suspicious to you?
Absolutely.
He arrives back. He said that they watched a couple of movies.
Dylan said Christian had calmed down, so he gave him his gun back. He says Whitley settled in for a nap. Dylan says he left for another errand, and when he returned...
911, where's emergency?
Man, we've had a suicide.
Knowing what you know about this case, if I asked you, was this suicide or homicide, where are you leaning?
Neither.
How do you mean?
I don't think that Mr. Andreacchio killed himself on purpose. And I don't think anybody else killed Mr. Andreacchio on purpose.
Dubose believes Christian may have once again held his gun to his own head, this time upstairs in the bathroom.
I believe that Whitley may have reached for the gun and the gun discharged. I don't think there was a motive. I think it was just an accident.
The Andreacchios aren't buying any of it.
Could it have been an accident?
I mean, anything's possible, but I don't believe it at all.
In this situation, everything points to murder. And then whoever staged it to look like a suicide.
That night, the coroner ruled the death undetermined. After an autopsy, a forensic pathologist labeled it a suicide. And just like that, the Meridian Police Department closed the case.
And so then we had to start this investigation on our own.
So they began hiring their own private investigators, eventually forming a small army of supporters and experts, including a forensic pathologist named Dr. Jonathan Arden.
It is my conclusion that the death of Christian Andreacchio was a homicide.
We've just been really let down by the police and law enforcement. We had no idea what to do or where to start.
Ray and Todd Andreacchio began their search for justice by hiring their own team of investigators, including this man.
I've performed about 3,000 autopsies on my own.
Former Washington, D.C. medical examiner Dr. Jonathan Arden, who examined the case file.
From the beginning, my reaction was something is wrong here.
Starting with where investigators found Christian's handgun. It was pressed between his left thigh and the front of the tub.
It's significant to me that the gun is in the wrong place on the wrong side.
Because he's right-handed.
He's right-handed, entrance wound in his right temple. How does the gun end up on his left side? Once the bullet goes through his brain, he's unconscious. He can't transfer the gun.
Crime scene photographs show that the bullet had struck the wall on the opposite side of the bathroom next to the sink. But
somehow the bullet ends up in the bathtub and he's leaning over the bathtub. So none of this lines up for him to have shot himself in the position where he was found. It simply makes no sense. Clearly somebody put him there. It's a staged scene.
The coroner placed the time of death at 3:45, but Dr. Arden believes Christian may have died earlier. He says pictures show Christian's body was in advanced rigor mortis.
Rigor mortis is the stiffening of the muscles that happens after death. The development of well-formed rigor mortis tells me that he's been in that position unmoved, undisturbed for at least several hours.
Which, if accurate, suggests that Christian may have already been dead when Dylan went to the credit union to empty Christian's bank account.
So, yeah, I believe my son's dead, and I believe he's trying to steal his money.
The evidence led Dr. Arden to reach a dramatic conclusion.
Somebody else shot and killed him.
I don't see how you can argue with forensics. Science doesn't lie, people lie.
Why would someone want your son dead?
Well, that's the answers, that we would like.
The scene was altered or staged. And usually when you do that, you're hiding something.
The family worked with a team of private investigators, including Sheila Wysocki, to dig further.
The Andreacchios have had to fight tooth and nail for the truth.
The investigators recorded an interview with Dylan Swearingen a few weeks after Christian died.
Since you are one of the only 3 people that were even there that day.
He had this to say about his visit to the credit union.
That's the only thing that I didn't understand. Why did he want me to have this money?
Dylan told them that Whitley and Christian were always fighting and that Christian didn't trust her, even sending Dylan to spy on her.
I was kind of like the babysitter. He always would ask me to check on her, see what she's doing.
And Dylan repeated that he, and not Whitley, discovered Christian's body.
When I opened the door, he was hunched over the bathtub. And I knew he wasn't alive. Just the way he was just sitting there and didn't add up to me.
Whitley's mom, Christy, says the day Christian died wasn't the first time he allegedly threatened suicide, and that Whitley told her about an incident that happened about 2 months before his death.
He had gotten intoxicated and getting angry and heated, and he had put the gun to his head, and he even would put it to her head, and he was asking her if she loved him.
But remember, when police asked Whitley if Christian had ever appeared suicidal, she said she didn't think so. Ray and Todd don't believe their son ever held a gun to his head.
We don't think it happened.
That does not sound like Christian to you.
No.
However, investigators found a misspelled message on Christian's phone that was sent to Whitley the night before he died. If this doesn't work when I get to my apartment, I'm putting my pistol in my mouth and I'm ending this. I'm ending this once and for all because, Whitley, you're the closest I have ever been to happiness.
I don't trust any of the texts because they were in possession of his phone.
Don't forget, Whitley had Christian's phone at the police station. Todd and Ray believe the message could have been planted. District Attorney Cassie Coleman dismisses that theory.
The phone was on the tugboat with Christian at the time that those messages were sent. And so I do not know of any way that those messages could have been manipulated to appear that they were coming from the boat if she was in Meridian.
3 years after Christian's death, Benny Dubose, who had taken over as police chief, decided it was time to get fresh eyes to look at the case. He assigned Captain J. Arrington.
Gave him the case. He worked his butt off.
Captain Arrington, a 30-year veteran detective of the Meridian PD, combed through the case file and came up with a conclusion that Christian's family had long waited to hear.
It's homicide.
Are you sure of that?
Absolutely.
And do you believe that Christian's body was moved at that scene, that somebody moved it after his death?
I have no doubt.
Captain Arrington, like Dr. Arden, concluded that Christian had been dead for several hours before the 911 call was made, allowing time for a cleanup.
The death scene had obviously been altered from its original state.
Arrington wrote arrest warrants for Whitley and Dillon. The charge, manslaughter by culpable negligence, which means unintentionally causing a death while acting with disregard for the person's safety.
Were those warrants ever served?
No, sir.
In February 2017, before Cassie Coleman took over, her predecessor decided to hand off the case to the Mississippi State Attorney General's office. They wouldn't comment about it with 48 hours. In October 2017, a Mississippi state prosecutor did present the case to a grand jury, but...
Were you allowed to present your investigative report at the grand jury?
I wasn't allowed to be at the grand jury. It's the only one I've ever had done that way. In all my years, it's the only one.
Without ever hearing from the detective who calls this case a homicide, it's now up to the grand jury whether it will go to trial.
Do you believe in a court of law you could get a conviction?
100%.
You were a member of the grand jury, correct?
Yes, sir.
And what decision was made?
The woman at the heart of this Southern mystery, Whitley Goodman, has never spoken publicly about the case until 48 Hours came to town. Whitley started talking when she agreed to meet our camera crew to get some video shots with her mom.
2 weeks ago, it just came to me, like out of nowhere.
She would not take questions, but she did read a poem.
The title is Moist by Whitley Goodman.
The verses describe what she says is her tumultuous life after Christian's death.
I miss who I was, the person I once was allowed to be, before the anxiety, the pain, and the notoriety, before your name was used in vain as the main source of my pain.
In Whitley's words, she is the victim.
Oh, it has been such a war. I guess it's me who we should hate. I'll be everyone's escape.
But there has been no escape for the Andreacchio family, which suffered a devastating defeat in late 2017 when that grand jury returned their decision to not indict Whitley and Dylan.
From the jurors that I've spoken with, they did not believe there was sufficient evidence to prove either of these people guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of either manslaughter or homicide.
The Andreacchios were crushed.
I feel like the Meridian Police Department, the Attorney General's office, and everybody involved officially has let us down. They let somebody get away with murder.
Whitley's mother sees the grand jury's decision as just.
She loved him dearly. The greatest tragedy for her is still losing him and finding him the way she did that day.
But the Andreacchios were determined to keep their son's case alive, so they took to social media, starting their Justice for Christian Facebook page. And in June 2019, a podcast Culpable started covering the case.
His death was ruled a suicide.
The actions of Whitley Goodman and Dylan Swearingen were now being judged by a national audience.
The podcast is exposing all the injustices that have happened during this investigation.
People from coast to coast became enraged, and they acted on that rage. Among their targets, DA Cassie Coleman.
Have you received threats?
Yes, sir. I have received threats towards me, towards my family, threats of physical violence.
Take your time.
There's a lot of tragedy and heartbreak in everybody's family.
Do you sleep with a gun by your bedside?
Yes, sir.
It's that serious.
Yes, sir.
In August 2020, the controversy grew even more intense. Right before 48 Hours traveled to Mississippi to cover this story, Captain Jay Arrington's investigative report from 2017 was made public for the first time.
I realized that this was things we had never heard.
Arrington writes, "It's my thoughts it could be suicide, homicide, or accidental, with one of the three to be proved with facts. Until that is established, the death should be classified as a homicide." That's a heck of a sentence. When you read that, what did you think?
I was shocked.
We spoke to Cassie Coleman just days after the report was released.
Mr. Arrington's findings, this report, was it presented to the grand jury?
Yes. I have had conversations with grand jurors that were on the grand jury, and I've had conversations with the investigators that were there presenting the facts. And they tell me that all of the reports from the Meridian Police Department were presented.
But while we were reporting in Mississippi, we found a grand juror who said that's not true.
You were a member of the grand jury that was looking into the Christian Andreacchio case, correct?
Yes, sir.
The grand juror agreed to speak if we agreed not to use her name or show her face.
I'm holding a report here that is dated January 11th, 2017, and it was written by a Captain Jay Arrington. At the time, had you heard this man's name before?
No, sir.
I read her all the major findings of Captain Arrington's report, none of which the juror said she knew.
Does that bother you? Is that something that you find in any way disturbing?
Yes, it's very disturbing because it seems that he had a lot more information detailed in his report than what we were presented.
I think it's a travesty. I think my son deserves more than that.
Now, with the release of Arrington's explosive report, the Andreacchios were finally beginning to think maybe they might have one last chance at justice for Christian.
I think we need feds or somebody to come in here and clear this up. I don't trust anybody over in Meridian. I don't trust that DA we got right now. I wouldn't want her anywhere near my son's case.
In November 2020, Like they do every year, the Andreacchio family and their friends celebrated Christian's life.
Today is Christian's birthday, November 4th, and this is our 7th night to have wishing night.
Heartfelt messages are written on these lanterns and sent floating toward the heavens.
Wishing night is kind of a way of just letting Christian know we haven't forgotten him.
This peaceful evening stands in contrast to the war of words and deeds in this emotional case, fueled by social media that includes acts of cruelty.
All of Christian's autopsy photos were placed on social media and I think downloaded over 2,000 times.
They harassed my daughter.
I still believe someone set her car on fire.
We've been run off the road.
You're kidding.
Absolutely not.
I bought a new car, and within 3 weeks, it had bullet holes in it.
In our interview with District Attorney Coleman, she said she would reconvene a grand jury if it turned out that Captain Arrington's report had not been presented.
I have said repeatedly and stand by, if that information was not presented, then yes, that is a situation that would open the door to allow the case to be re-presented to the grand jury.
3 months later,
Hey, Cassie, it's Peter Van Sant with 48 Hours. How are you?
I told Coleman that 48 Hours learned from that grand juror that she was not informed of Captain Arrington's 2017 report, a fact that may have changed her opinion on this case.
I think they should have done more investigating and brought it back to a grand jury again with more evidence, especially that report, to present it to another jury to decide if that it would be indicted or not.
Coleman confirmed that Arrington's report was not presented to the grand jury and said she is willing to reconvene a new grand jury. She acknowledges the Andreacchio family doesn't trust her to present the case. A request for the appointment of a new prosecutor is pending in court.
We're 100% confident that if the information is presented fairly, that people will be indicted. And then, of course, from there, there'll be a trial.
Complicating matters further, nearly 3 years after he finished his report, Captain Arrington was indicted in federal court, accused of using city funds for his personal use. Arrington's attorney, J. Stewart Parrish.
The allegations are false. They arise apparently from somebody either intentionally or maliciously misleading other folks.
Caught in the middle of all this are Dylan Swearingen and Whitley Goodman's families.
Is there anything that you would like to say to the Andreacchio family?
That we loved Christian.
We grieve for him too.
And we grieve for him.
Whitley Goodman's attorney, Bradley Clanton, filed a $47 million lawsuit against the Andreacchio family, the podcast culpable, and others for defamation and emotional distress.
You can't torture people for the rest of their lives because they got accused of a crime.
The civil suit also seeks an injunction to shut down the Justice for Christian Facebook page and end their public accusations.
You've had 4 to 5 law enforcement agencies all the way up to the Mississippi Attorney General look at this, and everyone has reached the same conclusion, that it's a suicide.
I was so confused whenever I started being blamed. I really was. You know, if they were so weak-minded that that they took pride in, you know, hurting me without even asking me or confirming, you know, what the truth is, then I don't want anything to do with them.
There's only one life destroyed, actually destroyed, and that's my son. He's not here anymore.
Today, Christian would have been 28.
So the case goes on.
I think that they wake up every morning and they have a choice of what they're going to do with their day. You know, they get to go out and live and love and travel and get married if they want to and have kids. And, you know, Christian, that's a choice taken away from him. Doesn't he deserve justice? Don't we deserve answers?
"48 hours. To miss it would be a crime."
Were you at all prepared for what happened in this case?
What's your emergency? My daughter was murdered. She's been murdered!
We absolutely were obsessed with this case.
January 13th, 1995 was the last known contact with Catherine.
She's handcuffed. She's been tortured.
It was always a big case within the department because it was the biggest case unsolved. Nobody felt safe anywhere. Nobody knew if it was a neighbor. Nobody knew if it was a police officer because of the handcuffs being used. My name is Tina Llewellyn.
Aaron Llewellyn, I'm a detective.
I'm a detective at Beaumont Police Department.
My sister's dead. My parents are over there and I have a...
Who's your sister?
Catherine Edwards.
I had no idea who Catherine Edwards was, but after I read decades of her journals, 1986, 1989, 91, 94, I feel like I know her. Things are looking up in my life. I'm going to teach second grade next year. I know I'm meant to do this. There were so many of her students that came forward to share the impact she had on their lives 25 years later.
They were always close to me in my heart. I'm Diana Coe, and I was friends with Catherine and her twin sister, Allison, since middle school. They were so sweet and so funny. They had a cute laugh, and everybody just loved them.
This was not an easy case to crack. Every free moment, I would try to work this case while still maintaining my caseload.
Staying up till midnight.
Every night. It just was not going to happen without the DNA.
If there was no DNA in this case, if that evidence had not been properly maintained, nope, we'd have never got there. My name is Brandon Best, Sergeant, Texas Rangers, Company A Cold Case Team. The technology has changed so much since 1995. By the time we got to Catherine Edwards, there were a lot more of these resources that were available.
We felt that genetic genealogy was going to be the answer to this case.
So you would do the police work.
Yes.
You would do the genealogy work.
Yes, along with another genealogist.
My name is Shara Broussard-Lapointe. Tina had started a tree, and we really think alike and work together to build this tree with 7,409 people in it.
Oh my gosh. I would call her no less than 5 times a day.
We were on the phone constantly.
Tell her what I found.
Just back and forth.
I blew her phone up.
Trying to get to the bottom.
We had to narrow down the different family members to find the direct lineage of our suspect.
Is this someone that knew her? Is this someone that was a stranger? She had some, ex-boyfriends. There was always the worry that it was a police officer. Some criminal is not going to have a pair of Smith & Wesson handcuffs.
There was no sign of forced entry at the time, right?
Right. Did we believe it was someone she knew? Yeah. The thing that really got me about the case was you don't expect to have this beautiful young single school teacher be murdered in her own home. She was such a great person, came from such a great family.
For Texas Ranger Brandon Bess, almost everything about the Mary Catherine Edwards case was different.
It was an unusual crime scene. She's over the bathtub, and she's obviously been sexually assaulted and handcuffed behind her back.
Were they police-grade handcuffs?
Handcuffs have always been a key piece of this.
January 14th, 1995. It was a Saturday. Catherine, as most people called her, didn't show up for a family lunch, and she wasn't answering her phone. When her mother and father went to check on her, they had to see what no parent ever should.
What happened, ma'am? We came over here and found her. Please send someone. Okay, we're sending someone, ma'am. Was she shot or what? We can't tell.
Catherine was 31.
My mom is the one that told me.
Diana Coe remembers hearing the news.
And so she said, have you not heard about Catherine? And I go, my Catherine?
She had been friends with Catherine and her twin sister Allison since middle school.
I was new to the area, so I knew no one. And they just started talking to me, asked me my name, and we were friends from that point forward.
The sisters, both school teachers, looked so much alike, everyone had trouble telling them apart, especially their young students.
Miss Edwards was my second grade teacher.
Heleniah Adams remembers being in her classroom.
Most of us grew up in a pretty tough environment, and being around Miss Edwards was a joy.
Originally, they believed that she might have been drowned, but there wasn't enough fluid in her lungs. So then it kind of became a suffocation by compression.
I just remember being told that our teacher wouldn't make it to class that day. Everyone just crying.
Early investigators could not piece together what happened, but those police-grade handcuffs were a big clue.
It was almost talked about like a ghost story around a campfire.
Detective Aaron Llewellyn.
Maybe it was somebody in law enforcement or somebody in security. Could it have been somebody that we knew?
In the weeks after the murder, police focused on tracing the serial numbers of the handcuffs, but came up empty. They also zeroed in on an old boyfriend, David Perry.
They focused on him early on because there was no forced entry.
But Perry was out of town that night. He gave a DNA sample, and it was not a match.
I wasn't there. It's not me.
The crime scene DNA stayed well preserved, and the years dragged on and on. Until forensic science changed.
Genetic genealogy technology.
Genetic genealogy.
By 2018, there was a way to take the DNA left at a crime scene and search for biological relatives. A program, GEDmatch, scarfs up all the DNA from people who agree to share it with law enforcement and upload it when they use sites like Ancestry.com and 23andMe.
Ranger Bess approached me and he asked if I thought we had a case that would fit the bill for that type of investigation. I said, absolutely, I know the perfect case for this, and it was the Catherine Edwards case.
So in April 2020, the DNA from Catherine Edwards' crime scene went to Othram, a lab outside of Houston, for testing.
There, they would give us familial matches, and from there, we would start trying to build a family tree to get us closer to our suspect.
Yeah. But the number of names to pursue was overwhelming.
When the family tree began to grow beyond my computer screen, I started to get a little bit confused, and that's when Tina jumped on board.
Aaron's wife, Tina, an auto crimes detective, began using her off hours to help sort through it.
The matches were all Cajun. Cajun ancestry, coming from the Louisiana area? Yes, particularly Kaplan, Louisiana.
So Tina went back to Catherine's journals looking for clues.
To see if I could see a Cajun name that jumped out to me. I did find a few French names, and they were quickly eliminated and nowhere in our tree.
And as she was building out the branches, one of the names on the family tree kept coming up. LaPointe.
As I'm researching the matches and building my trees, and you're researching other people's trees,
I kept noticing Shira LaPointe had built that tree. And then I'm working some more, I do some more research. Well, Shira LaPointe built this tree. And I'm like, is she related to our suspect? I had no idea who she was.
This is actually my great-grandmother, Claudia.
And when they called her, they found out Shara had been building her family tree.
It was my family's DNA kits that I had uploaded to GEDmatch.
And then they found out something that changed the course of the investigation. Shara was known professionally as the gene hunter and already skilled at working these cases. She'd identified one of the women buried along Interstate Highway 45 in the Texas Killing Fields case. And she agreed to lend her expertise.
I told him that I was willing to help.
Even if it meant taking a hard look at her own relatives.
It was kind of scary because I'm putting my own second cousins in this tree and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, could one of my grandfather's sister's grandchildren have done this? They lived here in Texas.
It was a complicated, multi-layered process using publicly available DNA, birth and death records, finding parents, siblings, and cousins.
As you build those trees, you look for information that is pertinent to the case that you're working on. We had a tag for people who were in Beaumont. She was a teacher. As you build tree, you look at people who are in education. Every one of these lines are built out.
The tree grew up and down and sideways. There were almost 7,500 names.
That's a lot of hours, a lot of work, and a lot of people in a family tree.
All the while, Tina hardly slept, working through most nights, knowing there was a killer still out there.
Every day counted. Every day mattered. I needed to get it solved.
Hunkered down at their computers day after day, constantly back and forth on the phone, Tina Llewellyn and genealogist Shara LaPointe are quickly becoming great partners.
She was a team player from jump. Never had met me. We talked so often that we became friends.
Best buds. Best buds. I don't know what else to say.
And when they needed DNA, they turned to Tina's husband, Aaron, and Texas Ranger Brandon Bess.
So from that point, me and Brandon Bess would drive around Texas and go talk to these people.
Convincing someone to give their DNA up, to give a piece of themselves up to you in a homicide investigation can be very difficult. When we would sense anxiety in someone, Aaron would immediately tell them, hey, who do you want to play you in the movie? And they would look at Aaron like he was crazy and say, what are you talking about? Well, this guy's a Texas Ranger. Everything they do turns into a movie. Who do you want to play your role in this movie? That calmed them down every time. And I, of course, threw out there, hey, I've already got Brad Pitt. So, you can't be Brad because Brad's playing me.
Was there ever a time, though, that somebody actually thought, my uncle may actually be a killer? Who knows?
In every one of these cases that I've worked using DNA and genetic genealogy, you have at least one person, usually two or three, that says, you know what? I had that weird Uncle Joe.
Once the uploads were compared to the killer's DNA, if the amount of shared genetic material was low, they knew it was a dead end.
There were times when we would come across a name and you get the butterflies in your stomach, like, hey, maybe this is our guy. And then it turns out it's not our guy.
After almost 3 months of ups and downs and nearly nonstop work, Shara hit pay dirt.
It was about 10:30 at night.
She was working a family line very distantly related to her own.
It was a very common Cajun name, Thibodeau. I got to a couple who were in Beaumont. I was able to see from records that they had 2 sons.
This was a major lead, a family in Catherine's town with 2 sons who went to Forest Park High, the same school Catherine did, at around the same time.
I put the names in the tree and I messaged Tina and I said, there's a couple in Beaumont. I'm tired. I'm going to bed. And I turned my cell phone off and I fell asleep on the sofa. And when I woke up the next morning, my phone had just blown up.
And it was you on the other end.
Yes.
What were you saying?
This is them. We found them. Just didn't know which one.
Okay. It's either Michael Foreman or Clayton Foreman. What did you do to figure that out?
The first name I ran was Clayton. And then when I came across his prior conviction for the sexual assault, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I'm like, this is our guy.
In 1981, a 19-year-old woman told police that Clayton Foreman bound her hands and raped her. She had also gone to Forest Park High School, where Clayton was the manager of the football team. Foreman was convicted, but was given probation and paid a fine. But he did not have to give a DNA sample at that time.
This was back in the early 80s. We didn't have sex offender registry, no DNA database.
And then they found another connection. It went all the way back to Diana Coe, Catherine's friend from middle school. In high school, Diana fell madly in love. Her boyfriend had graduated 3 years ahead of her, and they got engaged.
He was so kind. He had the most wonderful personality.
And when she started planning her wedding, she immediately turned to her old friends, Catherine and Allison.
And they were one of the first ones I thought of as a bridesmaid. And I asked them, and they said yes.
And the groom, the man Diana Coe married back in 1982, now he was their #1 suspect, Clayton Foreman. She, in fact, did know him.
Yes.
In hindsight, there were signs. When Diana found out about Clayton's legal troubles, the wedding was less than 3 months away.
And the wedding invitations had already been mailed out. And I said, rape? I said, oh, there's no way.
But she never got any details, and her fiancé explained it away.
He kept telling me it was a big misunderstanding. And so in my mind, I thought, well, he must be telling the truth, because if he got arrested, he's not in jail.
But you didn't really believe it was rape.
Right.
Diana's sister Anne and her brother Scooter were not so sure, and neither were their parents, who wanted her to call it off.
And I said, well, Diana, why don't you just wait? And she didn't want to wait. She wanted to marry Clay. She was in love with him.
She's believing him, and she's wanting to get married, then we have to support as a family.
He was like, I'm so sorry, and I love you. I want us to be married. I want us to have a family. And so I was like, okay, so I went through with it.
Diana and Clayton stayed married for a little more than 11 years. They had a son. The relationship began to fray over Foreman lying about their finances, and it ended after he had an affair. And looking back, Diana can see that he had an unhealthy fascination with police officers and the tools of their trade, like handcuffs.
I remember that he had ordered those handcuffs. Well, he had them hung over the rear view mirror, and I didn't think anything of it.
When Catherine was killed, they were divorced, but Diana remembers calling her ex-husband to talk about it.
I think I was, crying, and I said, oh my God. I said, somebody has murdered Catherine. And he goes, oh, really? Just like no emotion. When we hung the phone up, I can remember, because I was like kind of squinting and kind of like going, God, that's kind of odd.
With all the mounting evidence, Foreman needed to be found. He was 60 and no longer living in Beaumont. They quickly tracked him to Reynoldsburg, Ohio. What was he doing there?
He was an Uber driver at the time. So I was able to send a lead to a field office up there and basically did what we call a trash run.
You need to collect a piece of DNA so that you can ensure that it's the right guy, right?
Correct. So that's what they did. They surveilled his house and then went and snatched a bag of trash and sent it to me. So I brought that stuff to Houston to the DPS crime lab. And from there they tested it.
The likelihood that the DNA belonged to Clayton Foreman was a big number, 461 septillion, It doesn't get better than that, says Cheryl LaPointe.
I mean, you can't fight those odds. You cannot fight those odds.
And that was all they needed.
I got a text from a DPS lab technician, and she said, go get his ass.
Aaron Llewellyn and Brandon Bess were about to hop a plane to Ohio, ready to face the man they felt sure had killed Catherine.
Mr. Foreman, right? Yes, sir.
And while they're doing that, Tina pays a visit to Diana Coe.
Did they tell you they had DNA, though? Tina told you that?
Oh, yeah. And I just went, oh my God, please don't tell me it was Clay. I almost fell to the ground. I was just like, oh my God, oh God, I can't believe he's done this.
What do you think of sharing your DNA with law enforcement to help solve a murder? Chat now with the 48 Hours team on Facebook and X.
When Texas Ranger Brandon Bess and Detective Aaron Llewellyn arrive at the Franklin County Sheriff's Office to confront Clayton Foreman, they have a cover story. It's about a lost item from one of Foreman's Uber rides.
We go in under the ruse of someone had left a purse in his car. So he came in voluntarily to talk about a purse that was in the car.
It was April 29th, 2021, 26 years after Catherine Edwards was murdered, and they are sure they are sitting in front of the man who murdered her.
And we're asking you to visit with us about a crime that we're investigating, okay?
Did he immediately go, uh-oh?
No, he didn't.
So the crime that we're looking at is the murder of Mary Catherine Edwards, and she was murdered in 1995.
I guess he pretty quickly realized he wasn't there to give up a purse.
He did. And we found a picture of a wedding picture that she and her sister, Allison, were actually in your wedding.
Right.
And
1982.
82, right. Do you ever remember anyone ever coming to you about that crime?
No.
Were you aware of the crime even?
No.
You didn't know the crime occurred?
No, sir.
Okay.
We backed him into a bunch of hard corners. He claimed that he didn't even know that she was dead.
You didn't know that Catherine Edwards was murdered?
No, sir.
Did not. Do you remember them from school? Do you remember the girls from school?
Not really, because they were freshmen.
When you were a senior?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, on Mary Edwards, Catherine Edwards, didn't know her well. Did you ever visit with her at all?
No.
Did you ever go in her house at all? Any house that she ever lived in?
No.
Okay.
You know, did you know where she lived? No, had no idea.
So, and he's denying.
He is denying. You know, in these DNA cases, whether you're going to get a confession or not, you want to build up that background of, hey, did you know them, number one? Did y'all have much acquaintance with them, or was it just like a high school friend thing? How did you know them?
I think they were bridesmaids for my ex-wife.
That's right. Did you ever go on a date?
Never dated.
All the way up to, did you ever have sex with this person? Never, obviously, had sex with her.
No.
Never.
Never.
Did you go to college together? Did you do all? Everything was a no.
And we had those denials several times. And then so towards the end of the interview, we asked him, well, if all those things are true, can you explain how your DNA ended up on her and on her bed?
Do you understand DNA?
Mm-hmm.
And do you understand how DNA works? You understand you're made of DNA.
Right.
He's made of DNA, I'm made of DNA. And I think that Foreman knew enough about DNA that he thought he would have been caught already. He knew that he had never submitted his DNA. He had no clue that he was going to be arrested that day. Clay, I'm on level with you. Right here and now, I want you to hear me real close.
All right, sir.
That crime scene was processed really well, and your DNA was on Catherine's bed and was inside Catherine.
Okay. I mean, I don't know how I got there, but per se it was there.
There's only one way for it to get there.
Okay.
And that's by you putting it there.
Okay.
Do you understand that? Do you understand the implications of that? The day that she died, the night that she died, your DNA is in her and your DNA is on her bedspread. Now, I don't want you to say anything right this second. I want you to think about the next words that come out of your mouth. I want you to think very hard about that, okay? There's two people that know that story. You're one of them, and she's the other. And she can't talk. What I asked you is, now, to be honest with us completely, and tell us, how did that happen?
I'm not going to say anything. I probably need an attorney now.
You probably need one, or you do need one.
If you're saying I did that, then I probably need an attorney to talk to.
Well, that's all we got then. We're going to let you walk out of the door just like we told you. It's a grainy video, but you can probably see us grinning at each other. You have all your stuff? That he thinks he's walking out of here. He thinks he's fixing to leave here.
So as he got out down the hallway headed towards the elevator, we stopped him and arrested him for the murder of Catherine Edwards.
And after all those years and all that work, Aaron Llewellyn and Brandon Bess had one thing left they needed to do.
If you remember back when we were talking about the crime scene, she was handcuffed. So we had talked to the DA's office beforehand and got permission to use those handcuffs.
The very handcuffs that bound Catherine the night she died.
How did it feel to put those handcuffs on her?
Very good. It's a moment I'll never forget. You feel like you got to do something for Catherine. You know, like physically got to do for her is take those cuffs that bound her when she was murdered and put them back on the guy that murdered her. It's, you know, it may seem small to some, but it was a really big deal to us, and it felt good.
Even though they'd had their suspicions about him, the news that Clayton Foreman was arrested for the murder of Catherine Edwards was still a shock for his ex-wife Diana Coe and her siblings Ann and Scooter.
And she calls me and she says, Clay murdered Catherine. And I said, do what?
Your brain doesn't, because it knows him as a person, as somebody that you know, your brother-in-law or your brother.
That was hard.
Yeah.
I thought of Allison. And I just couldn't believe it. My thought immediately went to Allison, and I just said, Allison, oh my God, she's gonna hate me.
Opening arguments began this morning.
Foreman is charged with capital murder.
Guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
March 12th, 2024.
This is not going to be easy for a lot of people because it's been a long time coming.
Nearly 30 years after Catherine Edwards was found dead in her townhouse.
You got to remember, this happened in 1995.
Beaumont prosecutor Patrick Knaud and his colleagues Mike Laird and Sonny Eckhart are ready for trial.
You're going to get to learn a lot about DNA.
And they're extremely confident about their case against Clayton Foreman.
Mr. Burbank, do you want to make an opening statement at this time? No, Your Honor.
Tom Burbank is defending Foreman.
He didn't really have anything, and he knew it.
Next witness.
The prosecution calls Catherine's twin sister, Allison.
We wanted to remind everyone this is about Catherine and her family. And that's the way we wanted to start off with.
Here at 60, sitting before them, was the spitting image of what could have been.
That is a picture of my sister, Catherine.
Reliving the day she lost Catherine.
And then the next thing we know, my mom and dad drove up and told us there were no words. She was dead. That was all that mattered. I didn't know how, what, or anything. I didn't know what happened to her. It was just that she was gone was all I knew.
The pain and the loss still so palpable.
4 years later, I had a daughter, and her name is Catherine. Catherine Ann. After my sister, and she never got to know her. That's the hardest part.
It was a lot.
Heleniah Adams, Catherine Edwards' student when she was 7 and now 37, sat in the courtroom nearly every day.
It was times when they would show photos or when they showed the videos of her on the floor. It was as if your heart was breaking all over again.
You measure the proximity of matching DNA.
Detective Tina Llewellyn and genealogist Cheryl Lapointe, along with other crime lab technicians, walk the jury through the process of the genealogy and the DNA match. Texas Ranger Bess and Detective Aaron Llewellyn go through the final stages of the investigation, all carefully coordinated to make the chain of evidence airtight. And on the last day, the prosecution calls all the women who had been scarred by Foreman and were alive to say so.
He was your supervisor.
That's correct.
An old coworker.
Whenever I opened up the drawer, there was a pair of handcuffs.
A former fiancé who found pictures of young girls.
He said to me that he had them so that he could fantasize about taking their virginity.
His ex-wife, Diana Coe, who agreed to testify.
Did you think at the time you were in love with the defendant?
Yes.
When you saw him at trial, how hard was that for you?
That was very hard. And it was very embarrassing to me. And I do feel ashamed.
And it was during the trial that Diana learned about what really happened to that 19-year-old woman in the months before she and Foreman married.
It was the most horrific thing that I could have ever heard. I couldn't imagine what she went through and was so brave to get up and say what she said.
She was the final witness, returning to the night her car got stuck and Foreman, falsely claiming he was a policeman, offered to help.
First, he tied my hands back.
He tied your hands behind your back?
Yes.
Did he threaten to cut your throat if you didn't?
Yes.
This whole thing took a while, didn't it?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
What happened then?
He took me home.
Did he say something that you felt was odd?
Yes, he said 3 things. He said, "Stop crying. I'm sorry. I hope I didn't hurt you."
And there was another woman who did not testify but went on the record, an alleged victim of Foreman's violence, also a high school friend of Diana, who did not press charges. She told investigators Foreman attacked her from behind and put a gun to her head.
She had indicated back in 85 or 86 that he had come to her apartment and knocked on the door and told her that he was having financial and marital problems with Diana and he needed somebody to talk to, and so she let him in.
Prosecutors suspect Foreman used a similar ruse the night he appeared at Catherine Edwards' door.
That's the way we thought he got to Catherine. Because Catherine was very, very Christian, very given, very naive, and it's a wonderful thing to be, except when you're faced with Clayton Foreman.
I've always wondered, did he say something about me? Hey, it's Clay, and I need to talk to you about something about Diana. I've always wondered, but I thought I'll never know.
After 7 days of prosecution testimony, the defense calls no witnesses, and attorney Burbank closes.
You heard different things in reference to sex things and stuff like that. Okay. Still doesn't make him a murderer. You may not like him because of what people said, but I submit to you they have not proven murder beyond a reasonable doubt.
The prosecution wraps up its case.
And it's so easy to believe that evil doesn't exist. It is here in this courtroom here today. These are things I wish I didn't know existed. I'm sorry I had to talk to you about it. But I didn't bring us here. He did.
Now it would be up to a jury to decide Clayton Foreman's future. Patrick Knaud wants them to remember Catherine Edwards didn't have one.
And I do pray that Mike and I and Sonny have done a good job for Catherine and you. I hope we've done our job.
Is this verdict a unanimous one?
Yes, sir.
It takes less than an hour for the jury to come back with a verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty.
Clayton Foreman, guilty and sentenced to life for the murder of Catherine Edwards.
It didn't take long because all the evidence was there. Once it got into the DNA, more or less sealed it for him.
Larry Delcom, juror number 2, says he and his fellow jurors had very little to talk about.
He had no defense that it wasn't him. There's no denial there.
It felt like, hey, this thing does work.
For Heleniah Adams, finally some justice for a favorite teacher after all.
I wanted to close that door, finally. She meant so much to me.
And when you heard those words, guilty, what was that like for you?
We did it.
Was it emotional? We did it?
This whole case was emotional.
For detectives Tina and Aaron Llewellyn, genealogist Cheryl Lapointe, and Ranger Brandon Bess, it was the ending they had all worked for, but it left lots of room for reflection.
And I think the justice system has worked and he's where he needs to be. But to say that that's honestly justice for Mary Catherine, it's frustrating to know that he lived a life and she should have been able to live a life and have children and go on. That is frustrating.
I never used the word closure. I never used the word justice. There's no justice. He got to live 26 years. He got to get married. He got to have kids. She did not. There's no justice.
I don't believe there is such a thing as closure, not on this earth.
Bess always wanted a confession. They all wanted to know why.
70% of the time, you're not going to get that. And 100% of the time, you're not going to get the whole story anyway.
We all wanted those answers, and because he was spineless and didn't talk to us or give us any information, we'll never know the details behind it.
And everyone was still reeling, asking themselves how it was that Clayton Foreman walked among them and no one saw his monstrous core all those years, hiding in plain sight.
So when we identified him, I actually have mutual friends with him that were in shock. They could not believe it was him because they knew he was such a nice guy. He had fooled so many people for so long.
I personally believe that there are more victims out there. We just hadn't found them yet.
I find it hard to believe that he has not assaulted other people. I really feel with all of my being, I feel that there are others.
And
how do you think he was able to conceal this darker side?
That's the part I cannot.
I can't. I don't understand it. I don't know how he could. Like I always say, it's like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
I have my own speculations. I think some people are demon possessed or demon influenced because that's pure evil. There's nothing else you can explain. That's just evil.
I was married to a monster, is what I was married to, and didn't know it. I think if he wouldn't have married me, she'd still be alive.
But in the wake of the trial, it was time to turn away from Foreman and remember Catherine Edwards as she was and in her own words.
Wow, I didn't realize the timing on this one. December the 11th, 1994. She was murdered a month later. I have given my life to God, and I will follow his path for me. That gives me a feeling of great relief and peace. The human spirit is stronger than anything that can happen to it.
The vibrant, beloved schoolteacher in her prime, gone far too soon.
If you could talk directly with Mary Catherine Edwards, what would you wish to tell her?
Oh my gosh.
I think I would say I love her. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry this happened to her. And I was honored to be given the privilege to help give answers. Very honored. Very honored. She was a very special person. She really was.
Unfortunately, it introduced me to real loss, to trauma, to fear, to grief, to heartbreak, to all the feelings. A podcast I watched, they would always ask aspiring lawyers, when did you fall in love with law? And I think that's when I fell in love with law, in the 2nd grade, when Clayton Foreman took my light from me.
Helenaya is a student once again. She's studying for her master's in criminal justice and plans to apply to law school, a tribute to her teacher.
CBS next Saturday. A young mother is murdered.
She got shot in the car.
At first, this seemed like an open and shut case.
But finding the killer,
Carrollton Police Department, come out, your hands up!
was only the beginning.
It was only half the story.
48 Hours is all new. CBS next Saturday, 10/9 Central, and streaming on Paramount+.
If you're afraid of snakes, then everything you think you know about them is wrong.
My name is Ben Rennick. I'm with Ben Rennick Reptiles, and this is my story.
Ben Rennick is an artist when it comes to breeding snakes.
And this is a project that I'm really a big fan of.
Are there some species of snakes in here that Ben used to work with?
Yeah, actually right behind me there's a reticulated python, and Ben was actually very fond of his reticulated pythons. Ben Rennick was a great businessman. He was a young, up-and-coming rock star in the reptile world.
My wife and I mainly run this company.
Lindley Rennick is a kind soul, a devoted mother, and I would say a genuinely caring person.
They were happy, you know, they were very busy, you know, they worked a lot. And there was never any instance of anything ever being wrong.
On June 8th of 2017, at about 5:30 in the afternoon, Lindley Rennick drives home to where her home and her husband's snake facility is. She goes inside and she finds her husband, Ben Rennick, lying face down in a pool of blood.
I got a call from Lindley. She was hysterical, complete in panic.
911, what's the address, the emergency?
And I went in to try and find Ben. And when I found Ben and his body, I knew that it was too late.
Oh my God, my brother's dead. What may have happened? He got killed by a snake.
And I assumed it was a snake.
The whole building's full of snakes.
There's a snake every 4 inches in here. I don't know what it's done.
Someone being killed by a snake is not something that happens every day, especially in Missouri.
Paramedic said there's a bite mark on him, so if there's a snake loose in here, so watch your...
Being the coroner, walking into a death scene with thousands of snakes jumping at the cages, it was just a crazy scene to be at.
Do we have anybody we could call to deal with an anaconda?
I'm gonna kill it. We'll see it.
How could you have something big enough to kill a person here? I still didn't know what to think. I squatted down next to the body. There's significant damage. There's blood all around. When I saw that shell casing on the shelf just above his head, I knew this was not from a snake. This was something much more heinous. I knew that this was a homicide at that time.
Who would want to kill Ben Rennick?
That was the question.
We couldn't have imagined anything like that.
And it was a long wait until we got that answer.
I don't care if it's a 5-inch long snake. If somebody's trying to bite me, I'm gonna light it up.
On a hot Missouri summer day in June 2017, Montgomery County Sheriff's deputies were called to a unique and potentially dangerous death scene. A literal snake pit, a building with more than 3,000 exotic serpents.
Something got him, so watch your.
The first responders aren't sure if one of these snakes may have killed renowned breeder Ben Rennick.
Who is? Ben Rennick. Oh. Make sure there's no snakes around the victim? Yeah. Excuse me.
Coroner Dave Colbert had never seen anything like it.
They're holding shotguns in hand. They were guns out. You could just feel the anxiety amongst everyone there.
No one knew where the killer could be coiled or lurking. But while examining Ben's body, the coroner made that surprising discovery. Ben's body, lying face down, hid the true cause of death. He hadn't been bitten by a giant snake. Ben had been shot 8 times, once at close range.
This was something that was not just a random act.
There's a snake, honey.
Nearby was Ben's wife, Lindley. She had discovered his body.
And she was visibly upset, what you would describe as somebody who is grieving and, just lost a loved one.
This is Sam. That's his brother, Ben. Okay.
Lindley had called Sam, who rushed to the scene.
Sam? Lenny got here before I did, so I don't know that. Okay.
He was always shot in the back, almost exclusively. I don't think he saw it coming at all. Ben had such a future ahead of him. He was 29 years old, he was almost 30. A lot was lost.
Near this remote highway, about 80 miles west of St. Louis, once stood a world-renowned snake breeding facility, Rennick Reptiles, where Ben Rennick built his empire of serpents.
Welcome to the basement of Rennick Reptiles. We keep reticular pythons, blood pythons, white-lip pythons, green anacondas.
Ben had his first snake at a very young age, and that became somewhat of a passion for him. Became a hobby, did build into a business, and he was very good at what he did.
At the time of the murder, Sam and Ben Rennick were living in separate houses with their families on this 70-acre spread.
We lived out there together and raised our kids out there together. Then we went fishing on the weekends, and we were close.
Ben and Lindley first met when they were teenagers. They reconnected in 2011, says local attorney Catherine Berger.
They hit it off right away, and their relationship got pretty serious pretty quickly. I think they moved in together within the first year of dating.
Lindley had a son from a previous relationship. Sam says Ben became a second father to the child. In 2014, Ben and Lindley decided to tie the knot.
They had a beautiful wedding. It was a beautiful, small family event, and it was very special.
Soon, they had a baby of their own, a growing family to go with their booming snake breeding business.
Lindley found Ben's passion interesting. She would work day and night helping Ben with the snakes, handling them, cleaning them, sorting them.
In 2016, they opened a second business, Essentia Spa in Columbia, Missouri, a longtime dream of Lindley, who once worked as a massage therapist.
Hi, I'm Lindley. I'm the owner here.
I know that when she started her spa business, it's just something that she had always wanted to do, that that empowered her quite a bit.
By 2017, Rennick's snake business was wildly successful. He was shipping his snakes around the world, from the UK to Japan, and traveling to reptile conventions across the United States. He was so successful, Ben realized, that if he sold a portion of Rennick reptiles, he could make some real money.
Ben had planned on selling the majority of his ball python collection for, from my understanding, it was about $1.2 million. Things were going to be very good for my brother and Lindley.
The couple had received their first payment of at least $200,000. But then, Ben was murdered.
When you heard that he was dead, what did you think might have happened to him?
So the first question that I asked was how many snakes were missing. A facility like Ben's, unfortunately attracts a lot of bad people. Bad people that see these snakes not as these beautiful, amazing creatures that they are, but see them as dollar signs.
To understand the world of snakes that Ben lived and worked in, we spoke with Ben's friend, Dave Kaufman, who introduced me to a reticulated python, a snake Ben was known for throughout the world because of how he bred them in captivity.
Ben loved these snakes because how can you not love these snakes? I mean, really, when it comes down to it, they're big, they're beautiful, they're personable. She's gonna go right over your shoulder and try to go on the cage behind you. Let's see if I'm right. Oh no, she's gonna wrap around you.
My new scarf.
There you go.
Kaufman is also a snake breeder.
You ever seen a blood python this big?
And a documentary filmmaker who also travels the world tracking rare and exotic reptiles for his YouTube channel.
This is a first. It is a remarkable sensation.
It is.
Investigators looked into the theory that Ben's murder may have been a robbery gone bad, but ruled it out. No snakes were missing. Dave Colbert says it made sense to look more carefully at those closest to Ben.
We definitely didn't want to exclude anybody from being a possible suspect. I didn't know if Sam was involved, didn't know if Lindley was involved.
The day after his brother's murder, Sam Rennick was brought in for questioning.
I don't know where to start. Okay.
And they also brought in Lindley.
Do you have any questions for us?
What happened?
We don't know yet.
What do I do?
All your friends and family.
But soon enough, those same friends and family would have reason to question everything they thought they knew about Lindley Reddick.
Lindley that we knew back then was very sweet, kind. However, there were other sides there that we didn't know.
With law enforcement discovering that Ben Rennick had not been killed by a snake and quickly ruling out the possibility of a robbery gone bad, Sam Rennick had one major question.
Who would have wanted Ben dead?
A Missouri State Highway Patrol detective had the same question when he spoke with Ben's wife, Lindley.
Could you see anybody you know being upset with Ben to the point where that may happen?
Both Lindley and Sam were cooperative in their initial interviews.
Are you willing to submit to a shotgun or not shotgun, a gunshot rescue?
Yeah, anything you want. You got it.
Okay.
Sam says he understood why police would first focus on them, and he told investigators he could never imagine Lindley being involved.
I didn't think that Lindley would have been capable of murder like that.
Lindley also agreed to a gunshot residue test, but in her one-on-one interview with the detective, Lindley made a startling claim, saying that Sam might have had a motive to kill his brother.
Was there any family issues?
Like between Sam and, yeah.
At issue, Lindley said, was Ben's plan to possibly sell the property where they all lived. She claims Sam was upset about it. Ben had inherited the property after another tragedy on the Rennick family farm just 5 years earlier, the suicide of Ben and Sam's father, Frank Rennick.
Ben found him. He came and got me, and we went there together, and it was a tough day.
Frank Rennick shot himself in 2012 after being implicated in a multi-million-dollar Ponzi scheme involving fraudulent stock certificates.
There's a lot of people that lost a lot of money, due to my father.
Unaware that Lindley was implicating him, Sam wondered whether Ben had been killed in an act of revenge against their father.
We were concerned, however, that someone could have been upset enough to have waited and done something like this.
But that theory never took off, and Sam, who had tested negative for gun residue on his hands, was ruled out after cooperating fully with investigators.
I provided them, everything I had, my cell phone, the shirt off my back, my alibi as to where I was when the murder happened. I gave a polygraph.
As Highway Patrol detectives continued their investigation, the reptile community stepped up to help Ben's wife and children.
We have a male fire cinnamon.
They held this online auction of donated snakes.
She's a pretty girl, guys.
Raising more than $40,000.
Guys, remember, all this money is going to a great cause.
You guys banded together, and you got thousands of dollars to Lindley to help her during this time of crisis.
We raised tens of thousands of dollars to help Lindley and the kids.
Because you felt she was a victim.
That's correct.
But that supposed victim had a startling confession when Lindley spoke with detectives again just 11 days after Ben's murder.
So have you been talking to anyone, or did you have a relationship?
Eric.
How did you guys know that?
Lindley admitted she had been unfaithful.
It was just sex. Did he think the same way?
Yeah.
Detectives checked that man's alibi and cleared him of any suspicion. Investigators then interviewed Ashley Shaw, one of Lindley's employees and a close friend who she had confided in, which may have been a mistake.
I mean, I'm sure that she was having an affair, a couple affairs actually.
Ashley, the manager at Essentia Spa, said that Lindley had also been seeing another man named Brandon Blackwell, who she had met on a dating website. She said Lindley was hooking up with Brandon before Ben's murder.
I know Brandon was really a short time before that, I believe.
Along with Lindley's affairs, investigators had discovered Facebook messages between Ben and Lindley. They revealed that Ben had found out the spa was losing money and that Lindley had lied to him about it. Ben sent a message to Lindley just hours before he was murdered. No more lying. No more keeping things from me. No more not paying people and thinking it's okay to pay later. 4 months after Ben's murder, Lindley was in front of cops again and agreed to take a polygraph exam.
Okay, how do you think you did, Lindley?
I didn't think they close.
Okay.
Not exactly. Lindley's polygraph test was a dismal failure.
So the results of the polygraph showed that you failed the test. When I asked you, did you shoot that man? You failed the test.
Can't explain why I just failed that, but I didn't kill Ben.
But investigators suspected she did and may have had help from yet another man in her life. His name is Michael Humphrey, an old ex-boyfriend and ex-con fresh out of prison on drug possession charges, who she texted and called numerous times, including on the day her husband was murdered.
Coming in for massage.
Yeah, but the thing is that right there is very suspicious.
It appeared Lindley was close to breaking. But she continued to deny any involvement dozens of times.
I don't have anything to do with it.
There is so much circumstantial evidence against you in this case. It's mind-boggling.
But Lindley's gunshot residue test had come back negative. With no witnesses, no murder weapon found, or direct evidence linking her to Ben's murder,
I need to go get my children.
she left that interrogation room a free woman.
I'll walk you out.
The investigation went cold for nearly 3 years, until unexpectedly, someone came forward with everything Missouri Highway Patrol investigators were looking for. The boas are long gone. Pythons packed up. Snakes in new homes. The reptilian paradise turned crime scene, now a vacant frozen field. 8 fatal shots unanswered.
I wasn't sure what to think.
Unaware that investigators suspected Lindley, Ben Reddick's brother Sam was left more than a little uneasy.
It was very, very tough knowing that someone's out there that had essentially gotten away with murder. I was concerned for my own safety.
And without an arrest, serpent lovers were also left rattled.
So when the case went cold, we would all contact each other asking if anybody had any information on what was going on. It was frustrating. It was frustrating to have all this time pass and not have a culprit in custody.
All Dave Kaufman knew for sure,
humans do things other than what you expect. Snakes do not.
And the most unexpected behavior came from the human closest to Ben Rennick, his widow, Lindley.
We wanted to be, as understanding as possible. However, in time, when she refused to talk to us or allow us to talk to the kids or even receive my brother's belongings, we knew something was wrong.
In fact, just weeks after Ben's murder, with her spa business failing, Lindley had sold the family property, closed up shop, and left town in a hurry.
So like one day she was there and the next day just left and then never came back.
Today, Beth Mayberry works at that same location. But back then, she was just one more true crime buff in Columbia, Missouri, riveted by a case without a conclusion.
How much is this Rennick case talked about around here?
It's a lot.
And what do people say? What do they think?
Crazy. It's crazy. And people did start to wonder, maybe Lindley did it. Maybe she had someone do this. It did become a question.
A question without an answer. Until January 2020, when cops followed up on a jailhouse tip.
We're investigators with patrol. I'm here because you used to be dating Lindley. That's correct.
Out of nowhere comes this, what I'm sure the investigators would think as a godsend.
Journalist Dave McKenna of Defector Media was following the case that was about to change fast for investigators.
Your dad gave me a call today and said that you wanted to talk to us. Yeah.
It just lays out the whole story, and it is very detailed.
It was Brandon Blackwell, the man Lindley met online, the lover she was hooking up with the very week Ben was murdered.
Her husband is freshly dead, body's still warm, and she's found another warm body.
Only a year and a half after Ben was killed, Blackwell and Lindley had a child together. But Lindley alleged Blackwell had become threatening, and they had broken up. Lindley got an order of protection, and Blackwell was then charged with violating that order and stalking her, charges he denies. He was jammed up, in jail, and looking to make a deal.
Main concern is getting out of that cell, sleeping. Now you're coming to us when you're in a pickle, so... Right.
Blackwell's tale began weeks before Ben Reddick was shot dead, when he says Lindley and spa employee Ashley Shaw whipped up a toxic shake for Ben.
He was given a protein drink one night that was laced full of enormous amounts of narcotics and somehow lived through it, but the plan was for that to be the last day of his life.
A poison potion served to a husband by his wife. Brandon says Lindley confessed that and much more to him.
My information is out of the horse's mouth.
Okay.
So when pills failed to kill, Brandon says Lindley turned to one-time boyfriend Michael Humphrey.
They drove to the farm. He had gloves, he had a firearm. The plan was for him to do it. They get there, he hands her the gun and says he doesn't feel comfortable doing it. Something she's got to take care of. She walks in with the gun and just shoots him a bunch of times.
And according to Blackwell, Lindley's spa employee Ashley Shaw was once again involved.
Brandon Blackwell told the police that Ashley was in on it intimately from the start of the planning.
The cold case was blown wide open. On January 16th, 2020, cops made their moves. Lindley Rennick and Michael Humphrey were arrested, charged with the murder of Ben Rennick. Loved ones and friends never saw it coming.
What that moment was like for you?
Disbelief. I thought they got the wrong person.
It took us years to find out that Lindley was lying and that she was living in a double life. A sociopath. If you look that up, that's Lindley's picture will be sitting right there with it.
But what motive could Lindley have to murder the man she had built so much with? Some say it was as cold-blooded as a cobra. Money.
Lindley stood to gain millions of dollars from the death of my brother. Between the life insurance, the sale of the snakes, and the family farm that she would inherit, it was significant.
Still, investigators needed someone to flip. They arrested Ashley and fast let her know exactly what her future reality might look like.
Now is the time. You're either on Team Lindley or you're on Team Missouri, and Team Lindley's going to jail. They're going to prison for first-degree murder.
In exchange for leniency, Ashley turned on her one-time boss, starting with the toxic ingredients in Lindley's venomous smoothie. Ashley would say that Lindley told her Ben had abused her.
She asked if I could get any any prescription pills or anything in the amount that could help her kill him. And so I got her, it was Percocet, I'm pretty sure. And there was, I think, 15 of them.
According to Ashley, after the shooting, Lindley claimed Michael Humphrey was the trigger man. But she says a few days later, Lindley changed her story. Ashley now claimed that Lindley confessed to being the killer.
And she said, oh, no, once we got there, I was fine to do it. And so he handed me the gun and I did it.
After the murder, she ever seem remorseful? She ever
Never.
seem sorry?
Never. No.
But as the case headed to trial, Lindley's legal team insists Michael Humphrey was the real shooter. And they argue the state's case isn't based on truth, but on the fearful, coerced testimony of Ashley Shaw.
You're either on Team Lindley or you're on Team Missouri, and Team Lindley is going to jail.
How would that impact somebody, a woman like Ashley Shaw, do you think?
Well, if Ashley Shaw ever wants to leave that interview room for the rest of her life or for the indefinite future, she's going to change her story.
It was only after that threat that she changed her story and implicated Lindley Rennick.
I don't know what happened with him. I don't know.
It took a lot of time to just process, the lies that we were given by Lindley.
In late 2021, Sam Rennick was bracing himself for the trials of his brother's alleged killers.
My biggest concern was keeping my composure during the whole time.
First up, Lindley's old boyfriend, Michael Humphrey. The prosecution said Lindley fired the gun and that Humphrey was in on the plan.
Prosecutor said he was in on the plotting, he provided the weapon, he helped knock off her husband.
But that murder weapon had not been recovered. Humphrey's defense argued that he had been lured to the snake farm by Lindley, who claimed she wanted protection when asking Ben for a divorce. Lindley had then surprised him and pulled out a gun and shot her husband.
They painted him as kind of a fawning suitor of this pretty blonde, petite snake salesman.
The jury didn't believe Humphrey's story of being an innocent spectator. After deliberating for just 5 hours, jurors convicted him of first-degree murder.
Lindley is a manipulator, and I truly believe that he was manipulated into where he is right now.
Then, facing life behind bars, Michael Humphrey changed his story. Lindley's trial attorneys Tim Hessman and Catherine Berger.
He decides to flip. Why does he do that?
He's convicted of first-degree murder after a jury trial. He agrees to cooperate with the state in the hopes that he might be able to parole out eventually.
Humphrey now admits that he provided the gun that Lindley used to shoot her husband.
And he tells them where they can find it, which is in his girlfriend's mother's attic.
With the murder weapon in hand, jurors in Lindley's upcoming trial would have to answer one unresolved question. Who pulled the trigger?
This is case number 3007, State versus Lindley Rennick.
The defendant, Lindley Rennick, shot her husband, Ben, 8 times, killing him. We're going to come back and ask you to find her guilty of murder.
The prosecution painted Lindley as cold-blooded as one of her husband's snakes, a killer who shot Ben and then went about her daily routine as if nothing had happened.
She goes to the school, picks up her 2 children, and drives them back to the place where she knows she is going to find their father's dead body. Because she killed him.
Lindley is being deceptive to Ben.
The defense counters by saying that while Lindley lied and cheated on Ben, that doesn't make her a killer.
She's not planning a murder, she's planning a divorce.
They pointed the finger at the man already convicted of murdering Ben Rennick.
Michael Humphrey took it upon himself, acting completely independently, took Ben's life himself.
But Lindley's employee and confidant, Ashley Shaw, now the prosecution's star witness, swears Michael Humphrey and Lindley were full partners in crime.
Michael was going to come to the spa and they were going to go together to her house, his business, to kill him at home or at work.
Shaw says after the murder, Lindley returned to the spa, not for a massage, but to wash away her sins.
So Lindley goes back there and she tells you to do what?
To give her a shower. And she asked me to scrub her body and her hands really well, and she washed.
Then Ashley tells the jurors what Lindley told her about what really happened at Rennick Reptiles the day Ben was killed.
She said that Michael got too nervous or didn't want to do it, and so he handed her the gun and she actually killed him. She said that she put the gun to his back and shot him several times.
But the defense claims Ashley Shaw, just like Michael Humphrey, made up this story in order to avoid life in prison.
How are you able to be so calm when you're being questioned about murders that you evidently claim to be involved in? How is that, Ashley?
I don't know.
There are so many aspects of Ashley Shaw's story that simply are not credible.
And now, in a strange twist of judicial fate, the prosecution called an unlikely key witness to the stand.
Now, what am I holding up?
That's my gun.
That's what your gun is?
Convicted murderer Michael Humphrey, who now swears he's telling the truth about how Lindley killed her husband.
I heard a shot come out, so I kind of ducked a little bit. I looked down through there, and she was at the end of the corridor, or whatever you want to call it, posed up like this with the gun.
All right, thank you so much.
Call your next witness. Caitlin Boyle.
As the trial neared its end, the defense took a chance on a star witness of their own. Lindley began by detailing the troubled and sometimes violent marriage she claims she was trying to escape.
Lindley, was there ever any other occasion where an argument with Ben turned physical?
Yes. Ben and I had been arguing at the house, and he grabbed my arm and pushed me into the refrigerator and was like, "I'm not done with this, we're gonna finish it now."
Lindley Rennick never filed any police reports about the alleged physical abuse.
Abusive is a word that I would not use with Ben. He was very kind, very loving.
Then came her chance to explain why she asked Michael Humphrey to accompany her that fatal day.
"Hey, my marriage is falling apart. Will you please just go with me just to make sure, like, you know, I'm safe and I can get some stuff and go?"
Did you ask Michael to help you kill your husband?
No.
Set the scene for me and the jury.
I walked up right behind Michael, and then Michael turned around and I saw a gun in his hands, and then I heard shots ring out and I screamed and I ran outside, and then I heard more shots go off and everything just went numb, and I remember staring at the trees and then Michael running out of the facility and pushing me towards the car and telling me, "We have to go, Lindley, get in the car, we have to go now."
Claiming to be in shock, Lindley admitted she didn't tell the truth to investigators, but said that didn't add up to murder.
And I understand what that means and how this looks. I don't know how to fully express that I never wanted Ben dead. And
Miss Rennick, you and Michael Humphrey.
The prosecution was ready to strike.
You were interviewed by a bunch of cops, correct?
Yes.
And you lied to them every time.
Yes.
But deep down in that heart of yours, and in that brain of yours, you know who killed him, correct?
Yes.
Lindley's lies to cops included a terrible slander, accusing Sam Rennick of killing his brother.
And then anytime the police asked me who I thought, I just told them Sam. I'm so sorry.
Her trying to apologize to me on the stand and garner sympathy with the jury didn't sit well with me.
I'm sorry.
There's no low, too low for that one.
Why should these jurors now believe you? You now want these 12 people to believe it, correct?
Yes.
I bet you do.
While I regret that it took her 2.5 years to tell the truth, I think she was relieved that the full story had finally been told, and now it was in the jury's hands.
It had been almost 5 long years since Ben Rennick was murdered. Exhausted, Sam waited for a jury to weigh the evidence against his younger brother's bride.
And for the record,
And after 12 hours, the judge revealed the verdict.
As to count 1, we, the jury, find the defendant, Lindley Rennick, guilty of murder in the 2nd degree. Verdict as to count 2, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty of armed criminal action.
In that moment, 33-year-old Lindley Rennick became a convicted killer.
She really believed that she was going to get away with all this. And she really believed that she was going to get what she had planned after murdering my brother.
The time still to be measured, the length of her stay in a Missouri prison.
You may now retire to consider punishment in this case.
For that, jurors gathered again for a separate sentencing hearing. While life was an option, the jury would settle on something considerably less.
Punishment for murder in the 2nd degree at 13 years. Punishment for armed criminal action at 3 years.
13 plus 3 for Ben Rennick's life. Jurors never said why they chose such a seemingly light punishment. But 6 weeks later, Sam would tell the court that the sentence itself was an injustice.
I beg the common person to watch the trial again and ask themselves if my brother's life was worth only 16 years. 16 years is why I'm here today.
He would recount that hideous day that changed everything.
The web of devastation travels far.
And spared no one.
She put the children through this experience. Here I am, covered in my brother's blood, attempting to comfort the children, despite them asking me if their daddy is dead.
Sam's frustration at the sentence seemed to be shared by the judge. But under Missouri law, he could not increase Lindley's punishment.
You're awful lucky, ma'am. You're gonna get out in your 40s, and my 40s weren't too bad. I just hope you don't kill again. That's it.
Some reflected on the cast of bad characters, 2 convicted killers, and Ashley Shaw, granted immunity after plotting with Lindley twice.
These people, these creeps and dark characters behaving very badly and behaving inhumanely towards humans.
Ben Rennick had created an Eden for serpent lovers.
Spot-nosed clown.
But it was people, not a snake, that destroyed his paradise.
You can reduce it to a story of greed. It may be as simple as that.
Greed that left in its bloody wake children and a brother determined to carry on.
The kids lost their father, my babies and Ben's babies, and I'm here to take care of them for the rest of my life.
And around the world, wherever reptiles coil, slither, and slide, the loss of a superstar is still felt.
What happened to Ben was a tragedy that absolutely did not need to happen. And
yet Ben Rennick lives on in a way he would surely have loved, celebrated with a new breed of snake, named just for him.
the Rennick Ghost, and what Ghost is a slight reduction of black's color. It gives the snake kind of a ghosty appearance to it. And that is such a testament to what Ben meant to this community that he now has a mutation of a snake named after him.
You miss your friend.
Every single expo that we would see each other at, there is a vacancy there that will never be filled again.
"48 hours to miss it would be a crime."
Were you at all prepared for what happened in this case?